Hi, good morning or afternoon or even evening to you all today. My name's Emma Williams. Welcome to this webinar all about getting to that next academic position. Let's just dive in, shall we? So this webinar is brought to you by Researcher Live. So a fantastic suite of all sorts of tools for researchers, really to help you enhance your productivity. Fantastic resource for researchers. With Researcher Live, it does lots of different things. So you can read the latest articles without having to search. You can plan, you can collect, you can organize your research. A good one for me. Find the right journal for submission, write better manuscripts, who wouldn't want that, and make papers really submission ready. You can learn new skills, and there's also a community that you can connect with. So lots of different things available on the platform. Including that, on that platform, there are over 120 courses, there are a couple by me on there, designed by research experts who really are designing courses to help you in your researcher journey. So some fantastic courses. And how do you access this? Well, so you can try a free Researcher Life Essentials pack. So great resources, and we're going to pop the link, or one of my esteemed colleagues is going to pop the link into the chat for you so that you can register for that free essentials pack, which gives you access to all those things that I've just outlined. So again, something really helpful for you to help you in your research journey. I wish that something like this had been available when I was doing my PhD and my postdoc. Okay, so watch out for that link when it appears. I'm going to dive into our webinar this morning. It's morning where I am, because we have a lot to cover. We are talking about getting to that successfully getting that next academic position. So we're going to start right at the very beginning. First of all, I'm going to introduce myself very quickly. So my name is Dr. Emma Williams. Very nice to meet you all. My biog is there, but basically a long time ago, I studied physics at Cambridge as an undergraduate, then moved into a much more interdisciplinary practical PhD, looking at magnetic resonance imaging. Loved my PhD. It was, I just love research. I still do. And so it was one of those things that really sort of, I felt in my element. So I hope you do too, whatever research stage you're at. I then moved into a postdoc for 3.5 years, based at Addenbrooke's, the big teaching hospital in Cambridge here in the UK. And then made a career switch, which I can talk offline about, to be teaching people who are doing PhDs how to teach. So using all the skills and experiences that I had got as a researcher, and you will have amazing skills and experiences. And part of what we're going to do today is think about how you can best convey those through the job application situation. But I really, really enjoyed it, found I loved training, and to cut a long story short, was eventually head of academic practice. So looking after everyone from PhD students up to professors with their training needs in Cambridge. Being head was great, but it didn't play to my strengths. I love working directly with researchers. And so I decided that I would go and have my own consultancy back in 2009. So I am still in business, still working with a huge variety of researchers across the globe, trying to help them make the best of their potential, because you are all amazingly highly literate, highly numerate, problem solving, project managing, amazing people. And so today is about how do we get that? How do we tell a prospective employer that we are that person? So let's dive in. There we go. So we're going to start right at the start of any job search, job application with job descriptions. And sometimes I think we overlook these, and they are so important to the foundations of our success in getting that next position. So let's have a look. So I've just popped some notes on the slide really to keep me on track. We will have time for a Q&A a little bit later. So if you've got any burning questions, just keep them to the end and I will answer them. So first of all, it's never too early to start looking for the next job. And there are two reasons for that. Firstly, your next job, your ideal perfect job might be out there and you might not have noticed it if you weren't looking. So there is that, but it is also a really good thing to look at what could come next. And that way you can think about building, as the last point says, a shopping list of skills and experiences that you need to use this current phase. So whether you're a PhD student or a postdoc, this current phase, how can I use this to the best of my advantage so that I am ready for the next step? Okay, and that is key. So if you know what a lectureship or a fellowship or another postdoc needs, you can start collecting those things because you're in an institution and they're all about learning. So there are usually lots of opportunities to get skills and experiences, and also you've got the Researcher Life Prep platform as well that you can use. So starting to look at the job market, really important, and then be specific. Don't just look at the titles, look at everything else surrounding it. So drill down into what is called in the UK the job description. So that piece of paper or PDF that tells you exactly what they are expecting the candidate to have. My method of choice is to print it out, old style, I know. Print it out and grab some highlighters, okay? And you want to go through highlighting the key words, the key skills, the experiences that they're looking for. Now, don't, sometimes I am guilty of this, highlight the whole page, okay? Highlight the key skills because those words we're going to use in our CVs and our covering letters later on. We might even want to put them in our own LinkedIn platform so that we can attract the right types of employers. So highlighting the job description, really, really important. If when you're highlighting, you think, okay, not sure I've got everything on this job description, don't panic, okay? Job descriptions are written for people who don't exist. They are written for, in the UK, we'd say angels, okay? So they don't exist. It's so perfect, you couldn't possibly be that person. So if you've got 60 to 70% of the criteria, then I would be having conversations with that employer and thinking, right, okay, I'm probably going to apply, okay? We tend to think, I must have absolutely everything. A case in point, I was working with a postdoc the other day, and it said must have two of the computer languages listed. And he immediately went into meltdown. He went, I haven't got all of them. I've only got 4. It says only 2. So don't beat yourself up that you haven't got everything on the list. It's a perfect list, okay? So this is where I would then make a table. So you've got some job descriptions do this for you. They've already outlined the essential and desirable. If they haven't, make a table, really simple. And then in that table, you're going to list all the skills and experiences, and then you're going to list all the examples you can think of from across your career. So you might have worked before, you might have worked in between degrees, you've got your degree experience from undergrad up to wherever you've got to. So thinking about making sure that you've put as much evidence in that table as possible. This is going to help you then write the application. When it comes to essential and desirable criteria, the best way of finding out what is really essential And what is less important is to have a conversation with that employer. So if they have contact someone for further information, you absolutely must do that. Anyone who doesn't is going to be at a disadvantage. And I saw another research career person on LinkedIn today, did exactly that. So she contacted the person, then she knew what they were looking for, made her application much easier to tailor. Okay, so thinking about that contact. When you're filling in your table, I want you to think about writing almost like mini stories, mini case studies of your experience. And you can use the CAR framework for this. Really simple, but absolutely brilliant when it comes to thinking about your CV and evidence on it, but also the interview. And CAR stands for your circumstance, so what was happening, the actions that you took, and then the result of those. So hopefully something positive. So an example from if you've been teaching students, for instance. So the circumstances, I was teaching a master's student, I was supervising their project. That's your circumstance. They were struggling, again, circumstance. The actions that I took were this, this, and this. And the result was they went forth and got a dissertation for their project, a distinction for their dissertation. Okay, so the result needs to be a good result. But it can be really helpful to write those into the table on there. And like I say, if you're not ready to move, it's not too soon to look and use it as a shopping list. Don't just write the shopping list down and then hide it on your desk. I've got a messy desk here, you can't see. Hide it on your desk. Is check in with yourself. Have I looked into learning that programming language? Have I looked into developing that microscopy skill, whatever it might be that you're looking at? Okay. The job description is really, really important. And just forward to that. So we're going to come on to your CV next. So we've looked at job descriptions. We found a great job. We've got our table with all our evidence. Should we just send in a generic CV? No, let's not do that. Sorry, I've lost my slides. There we go. Okay, so do take the time to tailor your CV. First and foremost, CVs are read really quickly because recruiters know what they're looking for. Okay, you've just waded through the job description to find out, but they wrote it, so they know. So they're going to be super quick. Okay, typically, even for an academic job, that first pass of CVs is going to be about 30 seconds. Later on today, go and have a look at your CV and see how far you can get realistically in 30 seconds. What leaps out, okay? Tailoring your CV, you make the things that are important to this particular employer stand out and leap out, okay? So do make sure that you know what leaps out. If you're not sure, or you've just looked at your CV forever, get a friend or a colleague or even an aunt or an uncle, someone not familiar with your work, just read it and say, well, what do you know about me now? And that can be a really good test. If they can't leap out the keywords, then chances are you need to rewrite your CV. Sometimes there is a limit on the pages. Typically from where in the UK, we are looking at 2 pages and then publication list. It will vary across the world. Come on to that a bit later. But just because it says 2 pages, for instance, or even a 1-page CV, I've seen that before. Don't try and take all the margins away and take all the white space and write in, I don't know, 7-point font. That will be a disaster. It will be unreadable, really hard to follow. You won't be able to pull things out. So white space and clear headings. There's something as simple as bold, slightly bigger, is your friend. Okay, so like we've got on our slides here, we've got a heading that is bold and then some nicely spaced bullets. Okay, so that's what your CV should feel like. That sort of format, sort of light and airy, but full of content. Okay, so do think about the order. Sometimes I think we get stuck in a rut with the order. And it's up to us which order we put it in, so long as it sort of makes sense. So I tend to encourage people to put their publications at the end because that is going to grow. Okay, that list is going to grow, so it makes sense to have it at the end. Everything else is probably on those first 2 pages. If you are applying for a research position, so primarily a postdoc, where they are looking at your research brain and they're not interested in anything else, then put your research first. Okay. If you are applying for a teaching only position, like a teaching fellow, then guess what? You put your teaching first because that's what they're interested in. Now, you can do this in various different ways. You could do it chronologically, or you could do it with putting all the teaching together, all the research experience together. Whichever way you do it, just make sure that it makes sense, okay, so that I can follow it through. We don't want it to be like one of those sci-fi movies where we're not sure about the timeline and people keep going backwards and forwards. That's not helpful. Okay, it needs to make logical sense because someone is reading it quickly. If they have to stop, then that's some of your 30 seconds gone, which isn't a good one. So do think about the order. Thinking about your qualifications, so your bachelor's, master's, PhD, anything else that gives you letters after your name, those can either be put first or tucked under the research or teaching section. So whichever you lead with. You don't have to lead with your qualifications. If you have a doctorate, then it will probably say Dr. Emma Williams at the top of your CV. Well, it will say your name, obviously. But so they know you've got a doctorate, and then they will look to find it later. But it's up to you. You know, kind of your CV is your CV. There is also, if we are thinking about academic positions, which we are, that other third of academic life, which in the UK is called administration. It's all those other bits that academic souls do. So it might be journal reviewing, it might be outreach, it might be policy work, it might be talking, liaising with industries. It could be all sorts of things. It's that other stuff that when we look at perhaps our busy academic boss, then yes, they do researching, and yes, they probably do some teaching, but they do some other stuff. And that is important to put in there because that shows that you are going to be like your boss. You're going to be a member of that academic environment. So thinking about if you've just done research up to now and you haven't got any teaching and you haven't done journal reviewing or outreach or whatever it might be, you might need to think about, again, that shopping list idea. Is there something that I can do to top this up? So I was working with a postdoc yesterday, looking at a teaching fellowship role, and he hadn't put teaching first, and I had to go to the second page of his CV to find it. And it was a teaching-only role. So it's like you move that right up to the front so that they knew that he had teaching experience without having to dig. You want to entice people with your CV so that they keep reading. So a bit like you see on social media, that clickbait, 50 images that you've never seen before and you want to click. You want your CV to be like that. You want your CV to entice people to read more. So if they find the thing that they're looking for really close to the top, then they will read on. Other things to do. So in your table, you've already echoed some of their language of the job description. Now make sure that you have put that into your application. If they see their own words, they will recognize them and you are a tick list. All your CV and the application are doing is getting you to interview, getting you on that magic shortlist, okay? So do echo their language. The other thing is that it needs to be a good cultural fit to where you're sending it. So I imagine that you are from lots of different places listening in today. So, and likewise, you could apply to lots of different places across the globe. So you need to fit, your CV needs to fit the type of CV that they have in Germany, in Malaysia, in Australia, in the UK. So you need to do a good Google or ask your friends and colleagues, what do you expect a CV to look like? So in the UK, we don't have our date of birth, nationality, address, any of those things aren't needed. Whereas in some places, they are absolutely needed. So did some work in Singapore, and you have quite a lot of personal details from my British perspective on the CV. That's fine. You need to fit so that when they look at your CV and they think, oh, this is what I'm expecting, look at the skills and experiences rather than, oh, this is a bit odd. I'm not expecting that. The other cultural fit is perhaps discipline, something that I think we forget. So if you, computer scientists out there, you have a certain level of metrics that you would judge successful. Biologists, you will have a slightly different set of metrics. So if you are applying to be a computer person in a biological setting, you might need to do a bit of translation as well. So you want to make sure that they understand absolutely what a brilliant, brilliant candidate you are, as opposed to looking at it and going, oh, I'm not sure how this CV works, okay? So you've got the cultural fit of the place, the country, but also the discipline. Really important. And if you were thinking of applying outside academia, this is about academia today, but if you were thinking of that again, you might want to think, what does a standard civil engineering CV look like, for instance? So really important. I just cut and pasted a little bit from a job advert that I found yesterday. So they asked for a cover letter, which we'll come on to in a minute, ACV, academic diplomas, and a list of publications. So that's what they asked for, but every single job will ask for something different. Make sure that you follow the rules, okay? They've got the job, they get to set the rules, okay? Right, let's move on. So let's go to the cover letter. Now, I am old enough to remember when cover letters went on top of your application and they went in the post, okay? That's no longer the case, thankfully. Okay. So your cover letter is an introduction to you. So your CV might be bullet points, or should be bullet points. Your cover letter is going to be prose. So this is going to be proper paragraph writing. It's a formal letter style. So if you haven't written a formal letter for a while, and most of us, let's face facts, use email a lot, just familiarize yourself with what a formal letter looks like. And it absolutely must say, why do you want the job? Okay. If it doesn't say that, then you're missing a trick. So the employer has a square-shaped hole, and they want to know that you are that square that fits in the hole, that you are absolutely wanting to come and work for them, that you are enthusiastic, etc., etc. But do make sure that you say in the first or second paragraph why you want the job. Really important. You can't assume that they've read your CV. Okay, so like I say, in the olden days, this would go on top, but now you've got 3 or 4 electronic documents. They could click on any to start with. To make sure that both your CV and your cover letter are standalone, that I don't have to refer one to the other to get an idea of what a brilliant, brilliant candidate you are. Okay. Um, some people, when they're writing the letters, almost write it as a story. So they go, so I started at school and I studied this, and then I moved to my first university and I studied this and I did these subjects, and then I moved into my master's. And it is a way of writing it, but it doesn't emphasize your skills and experiences in the best way. Okay. So I would be inclined to have paragraphs that, rather than addressing what I did when I was 18, 19, and then what I did when I was a bit older and a bit older, ditch that and go for looking at the skills and the things that the employer wants. So you might want to highlight your research skills, for instance, in the first or second paragraph. Then you might want to talk about your teaching. Then you might want to talk about your, I don't know, industrial experience, if that's what they're looking for. So that each paragraph is answering right back to that job description. Okay. Because it's a letter, you can go into more detail than your CV would, because you've got short bullets on there. So you can be much more discursive, but do remember to be positive. Okay, so be really upbeat, use strong active words. So I led on this, I initiated that project, I developed this code, all those active verbs. If you are writing in a language other than your native language, then just make sure to get someone who is a native speaker to read that through, so that, again, it flows. You don't want anyone to stop. Then they're going to look at this really quickly. You want them to read it. So find a native speaker who speaks the language. So that job advert before was from Denmark, so find someone who speaks Danish if they've asked you to apply in that language. And do be positive throughout. Okay, so you absolutely need to say, highlight your skills, be positive. So don't, for instance, say, oh, I applied for 6 grants and I've got none of them. Write that instead, you have grant writing experience. It's true, and it's much more positive. So always, always, always be positive. Okay. So assuming, I did say this was a quick tour, assuming that your CV and your covering letter have got you to that lovely email coming back from the employer saying, hey, would you like to come for an interview? We need to prepare for that interview. Even if you've interviewed a lot, then, kind of treat every new interview as an opportunity to really hone your skills. More commonly is that I come across perhaps PhDs and postdocs who haven't interviewed for a few years. And unsurprisingly, we need a bit of practice. So my first thing would be to say is try and find someone to practice with. It can be a friend over Zoom or something similar, where you can send them the list of questions and go, ask me the questions. Okay. And they treat it formally. Practice, practice, practice. Really, really important. You need to walk into that interview knowing that you could not have done any more prep. Okay. There is nothing worse, and I have done it in my youth, of walking into an interview thinking, oh, I could have done a bit more. Okay. So making sure that you've done as much as you can. Yes, you might not get the job. Let's be realistic, but you want to feel that you've done the best job possible. Okay. So make sure that you do your prep, make time to do it. It will take longer than you think, especially if you have to do a presentation or something similar. You want that to be as good as possible. You want to have a dry run with your colleagues if it's a research presentation or a teaching presentation. have as much practice as possible. It really, really does help. The postdocs that I work with from Imperial College, for instance, always have a practice interview. And it makes such a difference. So try and set that up with some colleagues. You can return the favor by offering to do the same for them. So first things, make sure that you know all the logistics. So where is it going to be? Exactly where. So my big son graduates tomorrow. He is being really vague. And it's like, no, you need to know where to be, when. I don't want you to miss it. I don't want me to miss it. So you don't want to be late for your interview. That would be the worst thing. So finding out where it is. If it's online, I'll come to those in a minute. Rehearsing the journey, getting there the night before, if it's in a different city or continent, so that you know that you're there. And just making sure that you're familiar with all the logistical details. So do you have to do a coding test, for instance? Do you have to bring some paperwork to the interview to like proof of your degree or something? Make sure that you've got all the logistics sorted. Really important. Then find out the format. How many people are there going to be? How long is it going to be? The length will tell you how long approximately you should spend on your answers. So if it's a 10-minute interview and they've probably got 8 to 10 questions, you're going to have to be quite pithy. Okay, you have to be quick. Whereas if it's a 45-minute interview, you can be a bit more discursive. You could give them some examples. No answers should be too long because they may get lost. You might get lost because you're nervous, but they might get lost following you. So they can always ask a follow-up question if they're unsure. Okay, so make sure that you know what the format is. If you need to do any tests or anything, make sure that you've understood those, that you have the technology to do those. Mostly now, recruiters are very good at giving people dry runs on technology. So the Researcher Life team here gave me a dry run the other day on this technology so that everything would run smoothly. Okay, if you think about interviews, they will be interviewing you and then will be interviewing someone else and someone else. So there will be a queue. So you need to be efficient. Okay, they haven't got time for you to be late, for instance. So think about who will be there. You can ask who the panel will be. They don't have to tell you. But if they do, then the rule of thumb is not to contact them beforehand. That would be rude and possibly a little bit unethical. But you can absolutely find out who they are. To find out who they work with, look up their research profiles, look up their teaching profiles so that you know who this person is. And that will help you prepare the questions that you think, oh, actually, they're probably going to ask me the teaching ones because they're the one with the most teaching experience. So finding out as much as you can. If they don't tell you the panel, then, you might have a look at all the academics in that department. Again, thinking about academic interviews, there will probably be some academics on the panel, but there might be HR, human resources people, or there might be a student representative, or there might be anything like that, kind of another person. Do not assume that they are going to ask you easy questions. Sometimes they are really hard questions. So, for instance, a student representative is going to be asking, what type of teacher are you? Are you going to, give us good teaching, etc., etc. So, making sure that you know who is on the panel. Absolutely, that first impressions do stick. So you don't get a second chance for a first impression. I'll say that again because it's complicated. You don't get a second chance at a first impression. So you want to pretty much walk on campus if it's face to face, or walk into the Zoom or whatever it might be, an AirMeet one or whatever, looking professional and ready. Okay, so thinking, kind of dressing the part. So I'm not your mum, but it is important to dress respectfully, respect the process of the interview. It gives you a bit of a boost as well. So it might be that you always are going to be wearing jeans and a t-shirt for your research life, but today for your interview, to get to that research life, you are going to wear a suit or a jacket or whatever the equivalent of looking smart for you is. Okay, it's about respecting the process. The other thing that I would say is that everyone gets nervous. Well, most people get nervous, and it's okay to be nervous. And I think panels respect that too, because it shows that you care. But thinking about, what do you do when you're nervous? You fiddle with I fiddle with my hair quite a lot. Do you tap your fingers? Do you do that? Quite annoying. So thinking about, kind of, you'll know what you do when you're nervous. So thinking about how to minimize that. Could you perhaps take in a notebook so that, kind of it's, you're keeping your hands still. Another top tip, when I get nervous, my voice goes a bit squeaky. A bottle of water, preferably a spill-proof bottle, is your friend, and I think it's very acceptable now to take water in. A good panel should give the candidates water, but obviously if you're on Zoom, that might not work. Speaking of which, that's much better. So if you're online, I will get to the questions in a few minutes. If you're online, firstly, check out the technology, absolutely. But making sure that you are either looking slightly up at your panel or directly across. So I've played around with my computer extensively in my chair so that I am looking slightly up at you for the majority of this presentation. Quite often, because if we're working on a laptop, we might be looking down, and that can look slightly condescending, but also it shadows your face. It can't have a nice view of you. So think about the lighting. So because I do this professionally, I have big lights here. It's quite hot. I've closed my window because it's noisy outside. Think about your environment. Some people sit with their back to the window and they have a lovely halo behind them. The interviewers can't see your face. The other thing about online is that we don't have that level of rapport. So you need to smile a little bit more, perhaps use your hands a little bit more so that you look animated. Otherwise, you can just look slightly like a robot, which isn't great. So try and be as animated as possible. And you need to question spot. So you need to think, go back to the job description and your table and think, what question could they ask me? What is the worst question that they could ask me? Have an answer for that one. Remember the CAR framework? That is your friend. Okay. So looking at those, you can go to various websites to find questions that people ask. In the UK, there is a brilliant website called jobs.ac.uk that has an interview question tool. And so you can get all the questions, lots of different questions, and then a hint on how to answer them as well. So that could be a great thing to do for your practice, is send that to someone and say, ask me all those questions. Okay, but you absolutely must prepare all the questions that you think you're going to be asked, including that one that you're dreading. Okay. I'm going to just run through it in the last 5 minutes, so a minute per question, and then I will come on to your fantastic questions. Is thinking about what are my sort of top 5 that always come up. And I've helped lots of people through practice interviews, and they're kind enough to tell me what questions came up afterwards. And these are my big five. Okay, I think if you can answer these, you're well on your way. Other questions will come up as well, but these are the ones that I've picked. So why do you want this position? It might be that you've always dreamed of moving to Sydney, Australia for a position, for instance. That's not a great answer to the question. So really thinking about, from the employer's point of view, what are they looking for? Be passionate about your why in the same way that you were in your covering letter. So why do you want this position? So I'm interested in this lectureship position in civil engineering at the University of Swansea because or this position is the ideal opportunity for me to take the strengths that I have built up over the past 7 years as a postdoc into a lectureship position, something like that. So, kind of lots of evidence. You are a researcher. Make sure that you're not just saying something like, I have good communication, that you evidence it. How have you got that? Okay, so be positive about the why and link it back to the job description. Okay. Where will you be in, I'm missing a 5 in there, 5 to 10 years time. Okay, so this time frame question. Now, if you are on Zoom and you're having a virtual interview, then behind your screen on the wall, you could have a timeline. You could have your notes. If you're face-to-face, probably not going to work so well. But having that, yes, in 5 years' time, I want to be a senior lecturer with a group of 10. Our research group will be looking at this particular question, and we will have been funded by however you're going to fund your research. So they want a game plan. Okay. The 10-year question is again a little bit different in that in 10 years' time, where do you want to be? What do you want to be doing? You want to be a leader in the field. Okay, so you might need to talk a bit more about leadership in that 10-year question than perhaps a 5-year question. But having an idea of how you're going to get there, step by step, the grants that you're going to apply for, the students that you're aiming for, the size of your lab, all of this puts a flesh on the skeleton and makes it sound very realistic. What is your greatest achievement to date? Now, you've all got fantastic achievements, but this always trips people up. So think about it beforehand. And various people have said there seems to be a sort of tendency at the minute to say, I got through the pandemic. It's like, well, that's good. And I'm glad that you did. But again, it doesn't distinguish you from other people who also did that. So thinking about your greatest achievement, relating it back to the role. So if it's a research role, you might want to pick a research example. Thinking about the CAR framework. What was the circumstance? So what actions did you take and what was the result? So that would say why it was a fantastic achievement for you. Unpack it a little bit. What do you bring to our research program? So this is your opportunity to understand where you fit into that research group or that department in the institution. So it's your chance to have to demonstrate that you know what the department are doing, you know what the academics are doing, and you know how you fit. So you want to be not completely separate like this, but not completely overlapping because they've already got some academics like that, so they don't need more. So sort of you need to be just overlapping a little bit. So what do you contribute? What do you bring that they don't have? And how do you complement what they do have? Okay. And be careful here that you don't hurt anyone's feelings. So you don't say, well, I've seen what you do in semiconductor technology and it's rubbish. So I'm going to come in and do like some really good stuff. That's obviously, hopefully you wouldn't do that. But just be careful you don't tread on people's toes. This comes back to knowing who is going to be on the panel. You might, again, thinking about your future, is if you really want to go and work in a certain university, is getting people to know you and know your research before a job is even advertised, so that they know who you are, so that this is a really easy question to answer because you know the academics there and you know how well you work. You might already have collaborators there. So your academic network is so important, that is the thing that you should always be building on. And again, there are various courses that can help you with that. And my last of the top 5 is, what could you contribute most here as a teacher? And this is your opportunity to state or to evidence that you have looked at, firstly, what courses they offer, their undergraduates, their masters, whether they do any professional training, so they might train engineers or policy people as well. But so you need to know exactly what they offer. But as researchers, we tend to go to the research focusing pages. I want you, for this question, to go and look at the undergraduate recruitment pages. What are they promising their undergraduates from their university teachers? You need to be on board and aligned with those. So have a look at what they promise. It might be that you're teaching mathematics to biologists or medics who really don't want to be doing mathematics. Or it might be that you're teaching mathematics to people who really want to do mathematics and love it. So you need to think about what you might be teaching and how you contribute to that. Again, be prepped for whenever you helped a student who's had difficulties and all those sorts of questions. But this is my top 5 for you. So I'm just going to go to the thank you slide, and I'm happy to have a chat on Twitter or anything, but I'm going to hop to reading the Q&A. So Aditi said, is it true that first impressions stick? What else can you make a successful, memorable interview in such a short time? So be smiley, I think helps, even if you're nervous. Making sure that you're dressed respectfully, and showing that you've prepared. I think that is the thing. Even when I've had people who I haven't offered the job, I've had a positive experience interviewing them. It's just been that there's another candidate out there. So that positive experience is going to stay. Next time you apply, that's going to be remembered. So again, that first impression, even if you might apply another time, is really worth it. So Justin has said, how do you initiate the topic about salary? Oh, this is a good one. Do you have an opening line for it? Is it necessary to discuss it if the panel does not bring it up at interview and you can sense that the interview is over? Again, this might be something. Oh, and Aditi's just put in the chat the feedback form, which I will remind you to do in a couple of minutes. So Jason, I think for me, I wouldn't bring up salary in the interview. Most university jobs have a salary associated with them or a salary band. The negotiation over salary, I think, comes when they offer you the job. So if they offer you the job, you're going to be flattered, you're going to be excited. Don't say yes immediately. Say, oh, that's brilliant news. I wonder if I could have a couple of hours or a day to think it through. And then you can go and go, yay, got offered the job, and then think about the salary that you need. So usually on job adverts, there will be a salary in there. If you can't find one, actually for most academic jobs, they are fairly transparent, but somewhere else, then places like Glassdoor or a comparison site could help you ballpark that figure. If they have a salary range, say for a postdoc from A to B, then what you need to think about is your skills and experiences and where you are on that scale. I think it's always worth asking for a couple of pips up. Never ask for the top, because you might get stuck there for a few years, but also they're unlikely to go for that, whereas they might go for a negotiated point somewhere in the middle. But if you don't ask, you don't get. But I would wait for that salary discussion until you were offered the job. People who mention money in the interviews, it doesn't sit well, certainly in my experience. Hopefully that's answered your question, Justin. Chankia says, I feel that some employers offer positions to some people from within their own network. What do you think? Yes, I think they do. And I think they can, so swings and roundabouts, isn't it? Sorry, that's a very British phrase, but it's, okay, if you have developed your network, you will get opportunities from your network. I don't think, well, I think it's very rare. We do hear about cases, but I think it's very rare that someone will, literally offer someone a job through their network. But they'll say, look, we're interviewing. I strongly suggest you apply. Okay, so the wider your network is, and if your network knows what you're looking for, those opportunities will come to you. Again, thinking about, building up that academic network. So if you're applying to the University of Swansea, which is in Wales in the UK, then do those academics know you? If they know you already, you're already a warm contact. So you're already a little way down the line. So yes, and I think sometimes job adverts, absolutely, they've got someone in mind and they advertise it really super quick, and that person was always going to get it. Kind of view those as a bit of life experience, a bit of interview practice. But in the main, it comes from your network, so you can develop that through developing your own network. So Aditi's asked, is it more valuable to mention something personal or something in relation to your academic achievements, to question 3? I would always stick to the academic, Aditi, and this is a little bit gendered. So sometimes people answer that question with, my greatest achievement is my children. And anyone who's raised children, absolutely, it's a very hard job, but it comes back to the job description. So thinking, answering it with the job description in mind, because that's what the interview is about, is getting that position. So I would pick a research achievement. Chances are, because our research is tied to who we are, it will be a personal answer. So don't forget to put in that passion and that drive and that ambition, absolutely. But I would stick to something sort of research-based. Okay, I'm just having a look at the other questions. Bring my mouse down so I can scroll. Where did I get to? Mohid Noor says, what happened if your achievement performance was not that great? Will it good to boast for your intended position? What's your advice? I just pick an achievement that you can couch in positive terms. Okay, so we're not going to have got Nobel Prizes. Okay, but talk, what is, it's your greatest achievement. So that's what they're interested in. So yeah, just talk from your own experience. You have nothing else to talk about. Please don't make it up. Never lie. Didn't say that, but that's true too. Okay. What about the strengths and weaknesses during the interview? Oh, I love these questions. So strengths, if they ask for your strengths, again, relate them back to the job. So, and don't just say, I've got something like great attention to detail. Okay. Think about using that CAR framework. I have great attention to detail. A really good example of this is and there's some evidence. Okay. So, and with strengths, you can have a couple, but you don't want to make it too long. With weaknesses, if they still ask that question, then pick one that you can turn around. If they're going to ask the silly question, they're going to get the turning around answer. So a great colleague of mine always says, I'm really impatient. but that does mean that I deliver on projects really quickly. A great example of this would be, again, it's another way of turning it around and presenting, a successful mini case study. So yeah, a weakness question I don't like, because I don't think it helps them choose, but it might be in there. So it's being prepped for that, but pick something you can turn upside down. Aditya's also said, is it wrong to take some time to ask questions you might have at the end of the interview? How much time should you take for this? So a good interview would say, do you have any questions for us? And if you're going in face to face, I might have them in a notebook. They have not got time for 20 questions. Okay. Just pick one that perhaps you couldn't have found out in any other way. So don't pick something that is very obvious from their website or from the materials they've sent you, because again, that shows that you haven't prepped. But something about, there might be, how much research space are you planning on giving? If they haven't told you, it's perfectly all right to say, I think all my questions have been answered during the process, but one thing I would like to know is what is your time scale for making a decision? Because that's good, because you don't want to get out the interview and then think waiting for the phone to ring and they're going to make a decision in a week. Okay, so that could be a good question to ask, but I wouldn't ask too many, because again, having been on a panel, I'm very relieved when someone goes, no, I haven't got any questions. And it's like, phew, I've got time for a little bit of coffee before the next candidate. So, okay. Do these principles apply to more senior roles, for example, applying for jobs at leadership level? This is a different, so at leadership level, they're going to ask you slightly different questions, obviously, because there will be things about university leadership, thought leadership, field leadership. So you are, you're really at the top of the pyramid for something like that. So you might want to think about, those broader issues. So where does your discipline stand in relation to your nation's funding councils, for instance? Where do you think the discipline will be in 10 years' time? It's those big thought pieces that they might ask. I imagine that the length of answers will be slightly longer as well. So as you go higher up, more difficult questions. But this is where your network is key, because your friends might have gone for a leadership position and you can say, what questions did they ask you? Okay, so your network is there to help you. Do ask. It's such a great source of information. Or approach someone through LinkedIn or whichever networking tool you use. Say, I note that you've recently got a leadership at the University of Canberra. I was just wondering if you'd if you could share some of the questions they ask, because I'm about to go through the same process. Most people will take 5 minutes to answer that. Okay, so I'm just scrolling down. Little comment from Chris, which is, my academic record bad due to internal politics of the program. Okay, interviewers made it clear that they don't care about my international awards, just the bad grade average and the delayed graduation. So if you have had something happen in the past that you know that they are going to ask about, so apologies, Chris, that you've had a bad time, is to have a short and pithy sentence, or a couple of sentences about it that then clamps it down. Okay, so it might be that you have a gap on your CV, and that could be for a variety of reasons. It might be that you've taken longer to do a degree than others. Again, kind of just outlining the reasons without being too apologetic or blame pointing. Because again, they're looking at you as a future colleague. So if you go, well, you go into a rant about why you had a tough time, then that equally isn't going to be a great answer, because they're looking at you as a future colleague and they don't want someone who's ranty. So, you know, it's having just a short, measured sort of statement almost on that. You know, kind of our lives are our lives. There were lots of things. I took 6 years to do my PhD. Never write up when you're doing a postdoc, big piece of advice. But, you know, I got there in the end. And I think it's highlighting your skills and experiences, perhaps highlighting what you've learned from the experience. Again, can be a good way of turning that bad experience around into a positive statement for your interviews. But yeah, apologies, Chris, that you have had that experience. But yeah, a short pithy statement on that. Okay, I think that might be all the questions. Please fill in the feedback form. This is my first webinar for Research Life. So I'd be keen to see what the feedback is, and I know that my esteemed colleagues will be as well. So thank you very much for joining me today. Have a lovely rest of day, evening, wherever you are. And best of luck with your ongoing research endeavours. Thank you, everybody.